In the midst of a vast desert, where the golden sands stretched endlessly under twin suns, there stood an ancient ruin known only in whispers as the Pillars of Eternity. These towering monoliths reached skyward, carved with symbols from a forgotten age and entwined with stories of gods, monsters, and beings from the stars. Few dared approach, for it was said the ruin was cursed, its secrets guarded by powers incomprehensible to mortals. Kael, a warrior from the nearby realm of Thandros, was no stranger to curses or danger. He had spent his life battling the dark remnants of a fallen age, beasts that prowled the wilderness and sorcery that twisted men into horrors. But even he felt a shiver of unease as he approached the pillars. The desert wind howled around him, stirring the sands into ghostly shapes that danced and faded. Still, his purpose held firm. He had heard tales of a treasure beyond imagining hidden within the ruins, a treasure that could free his war-torn land from its endless strife. As he crossed the threshold into the heart of the ruins, the air seemed to thicken, heavy with an ancient presence. There, chained to the central pillars, was a sight that stole his breath. A towering figure, radiant and otherworldly, stood bound by immense chains forged of a material unlike any Kael had seen. Her skin shimmered like molten silver under the light of the twin suns, and her hair cascaded in waves of iridescent gold. Her eyes, even in slumber, glowed faintly, as if holding the essence of distant galaxies. Kael froze, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his blade. He had expected a vault of gold or a weapon of unimaginable power, perhaps even a trap. But this was no treasure. She was alive. And she was beautiful in a way that defied comprehension, both terrifying and entrancing. Her form, though alien, bore a striking resemblance to humanity, yet her stature and the aura she exuded marked her as something far greater. The chains binding her were massive, their links etched with runes that pulsed faintly with an inner light. They were anchored deep into the stone of the pillars, and though the figure showed no signs of struggle, Kael could sense the tension in her form, as though every fiber of her being resisted the bonds even in her unconscious state. Curiosity and caution warred within him. Was she a prisoner? A guardian? Or a threat sealed away to protect the world? Kael stepped closer, his boots crunching on the cracked stone floor. As he did, her eyes snapped open, two orbs of blazing light that pierced through him and rooted him in place. "Who are you?" Her voice resonated, not in the air but directly in his mind, a chorus of tones that was both alien and strangely familiar. Kael swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "I am Kael, a warrior of Thandros. I came seeking a treasure said to be hidden here. But you are not what I expected." Her gaze bore into him, and for a moment, he felt as though she saw every corner of his soul. "A seeker," she murmured, her voice softer now, though no less powerful. "Do you know what lies before you, mortal?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Kael replied, his grip on his sword relaxing slightly. "Who are you? And why are you bound here?" Her eyes flickered with a mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, and something he couldn't quite place. "I am Astria, once a guardian of the stars. Betrayed and imprisoned by those who feared my power. These chains bind me to this world, a punishment for defying their will." Kael's brow furrowed. "Defying who?" She hesitated, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in her. "The Celestials, my kin. They deemed my actions dangerous. I sought to protect the lesser realms from their dominion, and for that, they cast me down." The warrior's instincts screamed at him to be wary. Yet, as he looked into her luminous eyes, he saw no malice, only a deep, aching sorrow. He glanced at the chains, then back at her. "If what you say is true, why not fight back? Surely, one as powerful as you could break these bonds." A bitter smile touched her lips. "These chains are no ordinary bindings. They are forged from starlight and shadow, tied to the very fabric of this place. As long as they hold, I am but a shadow of what I once was." Kael studied the runes etched into the chains. He had encountered magic before, but this was far beyond anything he had ever seen. Still, something about her story struck a chord within him. He knew what it meant to be betrayed, to be cast aside for standing against the tide. Perhaps that was why he spoke his next words. "What if I freed you?" Astria's eyes widened, the faint glow intensifying. You would risk your life for one you do not know? For a being you cannot comprehend. Kael shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. I've done more reckless things. Besides, you don't strike me as the monster they make you out to be. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the whispering wind. Then Astria nodded. Very well, Kael of Thandros. If you truly wish to free me, you must break the seals upon these chains. But beware, the magic guarding them is ancient and will not yield easily. And once I am free, there is no guarantee that my enemies will not come for us both. Kael grinned, drawing his sword. Wouldn't be the first time I've made powerful enemies. What followed was a test of will and endurance unlike anything Kael had ever faced. The runes upon the chains fought him at every turn, lashing out with bursts of searing energy and conjuring illusions meant to break his spirit. Yet, each time, he pressed on, his determination fueled not just by a desire for the promised treasure, but by something deeper, a growing sense of purpose, and a connection to the enigmatic being he sought to free. Hours turned to days as he battled the magic, his body battered and his mind frayed. Astria watched silently, her luminous gaze unwavering. She offered guidance when needed, her voice a steady presence that kept him anchored. At last, with a final shattering strike, Kael broke the final seal. The chains fell away, their light dimming as they clattered to the ground. Astria stepped forward, her full height dwarfing Kael, and for a moment, he feared what might come next. But instead of wrath or destruction, she knelt before him, her radiant form dimming slightly as she regarded him with something akin to gratitude. You have done what I thought impossible, mortal. You have given me my freedom. For that, I owe you a debt beyond words. Kael staggered, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Just promise me you won't turn around and destroy my world or something. Astria laughed, a sound like the chiming of distant stars. Fear not, Kael. My quarrel is not with your kind. In fact, you may find that we share a common enemy. As she spoke, the air around them began to hum with an ominous energy. The sky above darkened, and a rift of light and shadow tore open, revealing figures that glowed with a terrible brilliance. The Celestials, Astria said, her voice hardening. They come to finish what they began. Kael raised his sword, though his arms trembled from exhaustion. Astria placed a hand on his shoulder, her strength flowing into him. You have already proven your courage, warrior. Stand with me, and we shall show them the power of unity. Together, the two stood against the coming storm, their fates entwined in a battle that would reshape the very fabric of the cosmos. As the rift widened, the figures emerged, their forms blindingly radiant. They were neither man nor beast, but entities of pure energy, clothed in shimmering armor of prismatic light. Their voices echoed in unison, reverberating in the air like the tolling of ancient bells. Astria, the fallen. You defy the will of the Celestials once more. And you, mortal, have meddled in affairs beyond your station. Your defiance will be punished. Astria rose to her full height, her presence a stark contrast to the cold, imperious light of her kin. She extended a hand, and a lance of crackling energy materialized in her grasp. Her voice was firm, unwavering. You call yourselves guardians, yet you abandon the very worlds you claim to protect. You have no right to pass judgment. Kael tightened his grip on his sword, his body aching but his resolve solid. If you think I'll back down now, you're mistaken. The Celestials responded with silence, save for the hum of their power intensifying. Beams of light lanced toward them, each strike carrying the force of a collapsing star. Astria moved with blinding speed, her lance spinning in an intricate dance to deflect the attacks. The ground around them shattered, each impact leaving deep scars in the stone. Kael, though mortal, held his ground. Astria's presence seemed to bolster him, her energy flowing into his battered form. His blade, once dull from countless battles, now glowed faintly, as if imbued with a fragment of her power. When a celestial descended toward him, its form a blur of radiant fury, Kael sidestepped and struck with all his might. The blow connected, sending the being reeling, its light dimming momentarily. You fight well for a mortal, Astria remarked, a rare glimmer of approval in her eyes. Kael grinned through the sweat and dust. "You're not bad yourself." The battle raged on, each clash of weapons sending shockwaves across the ruins. Astria fought with a grace and ferocity that spoke of millennia of experience, her movements precise and devastating. Kael was a whirlwind of raw determination, his strikes less refined but no less effective. Together, they were an unlikely pair, yet their synergy was undeniable. The Celestials began to falter, their once imperious demeanor giving way to frustration. "This defiance cannot stand," one bellowed, its voice cracking like thunder. Astria seized the moment, her lance glowing brighter than ever. She hurled it with all her might, the weapon streaking through the air like a comet. It struck the lead celestial, piercing its core. The being let out a cry that was both wrathful and sorrowful before disintegrating into a cascade of light. The others hesitated, their formation breaking. Astria extended her hand, recalling the lance to her grasp. "Leave now," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "Tell your masters that Astria is no longer their prisoner. This world is under my protection." The remaining Celestials exchanged glances, their light flickering uncertainly. Then, one by one, they retreated through the rift, which closed behind them with a resounding crack. As silence settled over the ruins, Kael collapsed to one knee, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. Astria knelt beside him, her expression softening. "You have done more than I could have asked, Kael. You have not only freed me but stood beside me against a force that even I feared." He looked up at her, a weary smile on his face. "Guess I have a thing for impossible odds." She extended a hand, helping him to his feet. "Your courage is rare, even among the greatest of warriors. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with words alone." Kael sheathed his sword, swaying slightly as he steadied himself. "What happens now? They'll be back, won't they?" Astria nodded. "They will. But next time, we will be ready. Together, we will gather allies, those who have suffered under the Celestials' tyranny, those who seek freedom from their control. The battle is far from over, but we have taken the first step." Kael glanced at the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly under the fading light of the twin suns. "So, no treasure after all?" Astria chuckled, the sound like a soft melody. "Treasure comes in many forms, warrior. You sought to save your people, and now you have the chance to do so on a scale far greater than you imagined." He met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. "Guess I'll have to stick around, then. Someone has to keep you out of trouble." She smiled, a rare and radiant expression. "And someone must ensure you don't get yourself killed." Together, they turned away from the ruins, their footsteps marking the beginning of a journey that would span worlds and shake the very foundations of the cosmos. Kael and Astraea, mortal and celestial, warrior and guardian, bound by a shared purpose and an unshakable bond. The desert stretched ahead of them, vast and unending under the twin suns. Astria walked with a regal poise that belied the chaos they had just endured, while Kael trudged alongside her, his steps heavy but resolute. The silence between them was companionable, broken only by the faint whisper of the desert wind. After a while, Kael broke the silence. "You mentioned gathering allies. Where exactly do we start with that? I don't know about you, but I don't have a list of names stashed somewhere." Astria's eyes gleamed with determination. "There are those who resist the Celestials, though they are scattered and wary of trusting strangers. Some are mortals like you, others are remnants of my kind, those who refuse to bow to the Celestial Council. And then there are the forgotten, the ancient beings who slumber in the dark corners of the cosmos, waiting for a time when their strength might once again be needed." Kael raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a pleasant bunch. I assume you have some idea where to find them." She paused, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The first is not far. In a place known as the Abyssal Vale, there dwells a being who was once my ally, a titan named Zareth. He was cast down, much like I was, but for reasons I do not fully know. If we can convince him to join us, he will be a powerful ally." Kael grimaced. "And what happens if he doesn't want to be convinced?" Astria's expression darkened slightly. "Then we will have to make him see reason. Zareth is not one to be swayed easily, but he respects strength and resolve. If we stand united, he will listen. Kael sighed. Fantastic. Another impossible task. Let's hope he's in a good mood. Their journey to the abyssal vale was grueling. The desert gradually gave way to jagged canyons and cliffs, the air growing colder as they descended into the shadowed depths. The vale was a place of perpetual twilight, its sky veiled in swirling mists that shimmered faintly with hues of green and blue. Strange, twisted vegetation clung to the rocky terrain, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. As they approached the heart of the vale, a deep rumble echoed through the chasm. The ground trembled, and from the shadows emerged a figure so massive it seemed to blot out what little light remained. Zareth was a colossus of stone and molten energy, his form both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His eyes burned like twin suns, and his voice was a thunderous growl. "Astria," he rumbled, his tone laced with both recognition and suspicion. "You dare return to me after all these millennia?" Astria stepped forward, her stance unyielding. "I had no choice, Zareth. The Celestials imprisoned me, as they did you. But now, I am free. And I have come to ask for your aid." Zareth laughed, a sound like the grinding of mountains. "Aid? You, who abandoned us in our time of need. Why should I lift a finger for you now?" Kael stepped forward, his voice firm despite the overwhelming presence of the Titan. "She didn't abandon you, Zareth. She was betrayed, just like you. And now we're here to fight back. You don't have to trust her, but at least hear her out." The Titan's burning gaze shifted to Kael, his massive form leaning closer. "And who are you to speak to me, mortal? Do you think your bravery impresses me?" Kael met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because we need you. If we're going to stand a chance against the Celestials, we can't do it alone." For a long moment, Zareth said nothing, his molten eyes studying the two before him. Then, with a low growl, he straightened. "You have spirit, mortal. And Astria, you speak of rebellion, but you have no army, no plan. Do you truly believe you can challenge the Celestials and win?" Astria's voice was steady, her conviction unshaken. "Alone, no. But together, we can rally those who share our cause. The Celestials are not invincible, Zareth. You know this. Their power comes from the fear they instill in others. If we stand against them, others will follow." Zareth regarded her in silence, his expression unreadable. Finally he nodded, a deep rumble reverberating through the veil. "Very well, Astria. I will stand with you, for now. But know this. If you falter, if your resolve wavers for even a moment, I will not hesitate to abandon this cause." Astria inclined her head. "You will find my resolve unshakable." With Zareth now at their side, the journey ahead seemed both more daunting and more hopeful. The path would not be easy, and the Celestials would undoubtedly respond to their defiance with relentless fury. But Kael and Astria, joined by the mighty Titan, had taken another step toward forging an alliance that might one day challenge the dominion of the stars themselves. As they left the abyssal vale, the mists parting to reveal the distant horizon, Kael glanced up at Astria. "So, what's next?" She smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "Next, we seek the sleepers, beings of power who have slumbered for eons. If they can be awakened, they may tip the scales in our favor." Kael chuckled dryly. "Great. I've always wanted to wake up ancient cosmic forces. What could possibly go wrong?" Astria's laughter joined his, a rare moment of levity amid the storm they faced. Together, they pressed onward, their unlikely fellowship bound by purpose and the hope of a better future. The journey to find the sleepers took Kael, Astria, and Zareth through realms that defied comprehension. They traversed the labyrinth winds, an endless expanse of shimmering storms that whispered forgotten truths, crossed the black shard sea, where the waters glittered with fragments of broken stars, and ascended the pinnacle of woven night, a mountain that pierced the fabric of reality itself. With every step, Kael felt the weight of their mission grow heavier, but he also felt his resolve solidify. This was no longer just about his homeland. It was about defying oppression on a cosmic scale. The first sleeper they sought was hidden in the Cradle of Silence, a vast cavern said to lie at the heart of a dead moon. The journey there was perilous, requiring them to navigate asteroid fields that seemed alive, shifting and colliding with malicious intent. Astria's guidance was invaluable. Her understanding of celestial patterns and her ability to manipulate the remnants of her power kept them safe. When they finally reached the moon, its surface was a barren wasteland of ash and fractured stone. The entrance to the cradle was marked by a towering archway carved with ancient glyphs. Kael ran his fingers over the symbols, their meaning just beyond his grasp. Zareth spoke, his voice a rumble that echoed through the cavern. These glyphs speak of Seryn, the Dreaming Forge. She was a shaper of worlds, a being who could bend reality itself. But she has slept for millennia. Awakening her will not be easy. Astria stepped forward, her expression somber. It must be done. Seryn's power is unparalleled. If she joins us, the Celestials will tremble. Kael raised an eyebrow. And if she doesn't? Zareth snorted. Then we pray she does not see us as enemies, for few have ever survived her wrath. The air grew heavy as they descended into the cradle. The cavern walls shimmered faintly, as though infused with the remnants of Seryn's power. The deeper they went, the more Kael felt a strange pressure in his mind, as if unseen eyes were watching. At the heart of the cavern, they found her. Seryn lay suspended in a cocoon of crystal, her form barely visible within its iridescent depths. She was vast and otherworldly, her presence palpable even in slumber. The air around her pulsed with an ancient energy, a rhythm that resonated in Kael's chest. Astria approached cautiously, raising a hand. Seryn, Dreaming Forge, Shaper of Stars, hear me. The Celestials rise unchecked, their dominion oppressive and unyielding. We seek your aid to challenge them, to restore balance to the cosmos. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the crystal began to crack, lines of light spidering across its surface. The pressure in the air grew unbearable, and Kael staggered, his head pounding. Zareth steadied him with a massive hand. With a deafening sound, the crystal shattered. Seryn's form emerged, her body a shifting tapestry of light and shadow, constantly transforming. Her eyes, pools of infinite depth, locked onto Astria. When she spoke, her voice was like a symphony, layered and overwhelming. Astria, the fallen star. You dare to wake me from my slumber? Astria met her gaze without flinching. I do. The Celestials grow ever more tyrannical. You once stood against them. Will you not do so again? Seryn tilted her head, her form rippling with colors. I stood against them and paid the price. My slumber was not punishment, it was my refuge. Why should I rise again, only to face their wrath once more? Kael, his head still pounding, forced himself to step forward. Because this time, you won't stand alone. We're building something, a force that can fight back, that can win. You said you shaped worlds, right? Help us shape a new one. One where beings like you, like Astria, don't have to hide or be cast down. Seryn studied him, her gaze piercing. A mortal, speaking of shaping worlds? Bold. Foolish. Yet, intriguing. Astria interjected. The Celestials will not stop, Seryn. If you remain here, they will find you eventually. And when they do, they will destroy you. Standing with us is not just an act of defiance. It is an act of survival. For what felt like an eternity, Seryn was silent. Then she extended a hand, a swirl of light and shadow forming a bridge between her and Astria. Very well. I will lend you my power, Astria. But know this, if your resolve falters, I will return to my slumber, and you will face the Celestials alone. Astria nodded solemnly. I would expect no less. As Seryn's power flowed into the chamber, the atmosphere shifted. The cradle of silence trembled, its ancient energy awakening. Kael felt a strange warmth in his chest, a flicker of hope amid the enormity of their task. With Seryn now part of their growing alliance, the group prepared to leave the moon. As they stepped out into the void, Kael glanced at Astria. One down. How many more to go? Astria smiled faintly. Enough to shake the stars. The alliance grew stronger with each step of their journey. With Seryn's power added to their ranks, Kael, Astria, and Zareth ventured to awaken other forgotten titans and powerful beings scattered across the cosmos. They unearthed the enigmatic Tideweaver, a sentient ocean that could summon storms vast enough to drown planets, and Renal, a nomadic swarm of intelligent crystal shards that could reshape themselves into weapons or fortresses. Their cause gained momentum, whispers of rebellion spreading through the stars. Astria's name became a rallying cry for the oppressed, and Kael's courage inspired countless mortals to join their ranks. Together, they forged a coalition that transcended species and borders, united by the common goal of challenging the Celestials' tyranny. The Celestials responded with fury, their legions descending upon any who dared defy them. But for every blow they struck, the rebellion endured, growing stronger. Kael and Astraea fought side by side, their bond deepening with every battle. Astria's once distant demeanor softened, and she came to rely on Kael not just as an ally but as a trusted friend and confidant. As their forces amassed, Astria unveiled the keystone of their plan. The Stormheart Citadel, a legendary fortress said to be the only place capable of amplifying the combined power of their allies. If they could reach it and harness its energies, they could create a weapon strong enough to sever the Celestials' control over the cosmos. The final battle loomed as they approached the Citadel, its towering spires piercing the fabric of reality. The Celestial Council had gathered their mightiest forces to intercept them, a fleet so vast it blotted out the stars. Kael stood at the forefront of their army, his battered sword glowing faintly with the energy Astria had imbued within him. Astria addressed their forces, her voice carrying over the din of the battlefield. Today, we stand not as mortals or titans, not as outcasts or rebels, but as one. The Celestials believe themselves invincible, but they are wrong. Together, we will show them that the will of the free is stronger than any chain. The army roared in response, a cacophony of defiance and hope. As the battle began, chaos erupted across the heavens. Astria clashed with the Celestial Council, her power matched only by their combined might. Zareth and Seryn unleashed their fury, carving through enemy ranks with devastating precision. Kael fought with unyielding determination, rallying those around him with his unwavering resolve. Despite the odds, they reached the heart of the Citadel, where a colossal energy conduit awaited. Astria and Seryn worked together to activate it, channeling the combined power of their allies. The energy coalesced into a blazing sphere, a weapon of pure, unbridled creation. The Celestials, realizing their imminent defeat, unleashed a final, desperate attack. Kael stepped forward, raising his sword, the weapon now blazing with Astria's light. With a roar, he struck the incoming onslaught, the force of his blow shattering the Celestials' assault and creating an opening. "Astria now!" he shouted. With a final surge of power, Astria unleashed the weapon. The explosion of light and energy was blinding, spreading across the cosmos like a wave. The chains of the Celestials' dominion shattered, their power severed. The Council fled, their defeat undeniable. As the light faded, silence fell over the battlefield. Astria stood at the center, her form radiant and unbowed. Kael approached her, his armor scorched and his sword broken, but his spirit unbroken. "It's over," he said, his voice filled with relief. Astria turned to him, her expression soft. "No, Kael. It's just beginning. But this time, it's a beginning we choose." The rebellion's victory marked the dawn of a new era. The Celestials' rule was broken, their grip on the cosmos shattered. Worlds once enslaved began to rebuild, their people free to shape their own destinies. The coalition became a symbol of unity, a testament to what could be achieved when beings of all kinds stood together. Kael returned to his homeland, now free from the Celestials' shadow. But he did not stay. The stars still called to him, and Astria had offered him a place by her side. Together, they would continue to protect the fragile freedom they had fought so hard to achieve. In the years that followed, their story became legend, a tale of a mortal warrior and a fallen titan who defied the gods themselves and won. And as they stood together, gazing at the endless expanse of the cosmos, they knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always had. Side by side, their bond unbreakable, their hope eternal.